the desert of the real.
Welcome to the Desert of the Real. I am your host, Ryan Hudson. Joined with me is your Jedi Master,
Jason Deeds. I'll take that one.
Today's a bonus episode because in the last 3 episodes we've been talking about Star Wars, the original trilogy, the Tridge. And we have been promising we're going to talk about this in-depth philosophy idea of the Force. The light side and the dark side. And then every single week for 3 weeks in a row, we got too busy. We got to talk about 2 other things. And we pushed it back. And now it's a bonus episode you're listening to right now.
Yeah.
But typically, the Desert of the Real is a movie podcast where I force Jason to watch big blockbuster movies he's refused to watch because he didn't think they're worth his time. We're currently watching the Star Wars movies. We are 2 high school teachers, and we attempt to use our academic training to dig deeply into movies. We explore the creativity, philosophy, film studies, and ethics in our films and push you, the listener, to think critically about your entertainment. We are grateful you're here. Thank you for joining us.
We are.
This is an episode that Dietz has been waiting for. He teaches a philosophy class at the high school.
I do.
He's all about philosophy.
Yeah, so this will be different than probably any other episode we've ever made.
Yeah. I don't even know what's coming up.
Oh, this will be fun for you then.
Because you read a
It'll be
book.
really
You read a
exciting.
book all about it.
Yeah, I did. This is the only episode I've ever done research for, really,
Yeah.
for this podcast. As we started out, and there were, people using the Force in the prequels, and further on, there seemed to be kind of some cohesive philosophies that make you either a light side or a dark side person. So I got interested in...
You mean like fear leads to anger?
Sure.
Anger leads to hate?
Yes, but
Hate
it's not that
leads
simple.
to suffering?
So, yes. But as I dug into it, it's not that simple. It's not even emotion, really. So, we keep hearing about the dark side, the light side, and balance in the Force, right? So, anyone who has studied really any Eastern philosophy at all would immediately in that recognize Taoism. Taoism is... I guess it's a religion, but it's more just a philosophy of life. So in Taoism, your job is to just be. They believe that the reason why the world kind of sucks is people are pushing against what they call the Wu Wei. The Wu Wei is the natural flow of the universe. Mm-hmm. It is how you were meant to move in the currents of time, and I was, and that rock was, and that chair was. And so in order to be happy and complete, the way to do that is to go with the flow, basically. But not in the Western sense of that. Just, it's more rich than that. It's understanding yourself and understanding who you are and where you fit in the cosmic flow of things. It's not just like, oh, you want to go jump off a cliff? Let's do it! Not that at all.
Okay.
So, one of the concepts that is probably familiar to everyone in the West is the idea of yin and yang, right?
It's yin and yang.
It is not. But that idea, the little circle that is divided in half light, half dark with the opposite color. So what the yin and yang represent are this idea that everyone has 2 sides. We're a dual nature.
Yeah.
We have a light side and a dark side, to use the Force. Any binary that we have in the Western society, Taoism would say there's the opposite as well.
So right and wrong, light and dark.
Yeah.
Star Wars and Star Trek.
Sure. maybe. I don't know. I'll have to parse that out.
Right.
And so, in the sense of the yin and yang, we have suffering when we try to prioritize one over the other.
Okay.
When we think of one or the other as bad or evil or something we need to change about ourselves or whatever.
So actually today in class, we're reading Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It's an allegory, but it's also about like change and stuff and improvement. I asked, as we were reading it, one of the questions as like, why do people stop progressing sometimes? Mm-hmm. And there's various answers. But then I was a little surprised at one of my classes that said, you don't need to progress anymore. Okay?
Oh, wow.
And I was shocked. I was like, what? We believe this? Like, does anyone else believe this? Because a student's like, yeah, maybe you don't need to improve yourself anymore.
Well,
like, maybe. But then a girl mentioned, yeah, what if someone's happy? I'm like, oh. Because I didn't think about that. If you're happy, maybe you are doing good things and, like, your life is
maybe
okay at the moment.
Yeah.
But
from a Taoist perspective, when you try to stand still, when you try to not move or change, that's when you start being unhappy.
Right.
And so they would suggest that what your student said isn't possible. Mm-hmm. It's not possible to be happy and not also be moving.
Yeah. Okay. See, that's how I would answer, like, oh, we should always be trying to improve something in our lives, type of thing.
I don't know that they would suggest active improvement.
Oh,
but
okay. So
just passive, not even passive. It's just allowing yourself to become who you are. I don't know how else to say it.
Because I want to try to make sure I understand, and also our listener understands. Is this a wrong way to interpret? Because it sounds like maybe an excuse to justify stuff in your life. Like, oh, I'm just that way, Does that make sense?
It depends on what stuff you're talking about. Like, I'm just lazy.
Yeah, for example.
Taoists and Buddhists would probably say that you can't be content there, staying there. So there's forward motion, there's movement, there's change. You become who you truly are. They would probably suggest that no one's part in the cosmic scheme of the universe is to just be lazy and play video games. Mm-hmm. That doesn't benefit the big picture. And this shows up in the Judeo-Christian ethic as well. You can be happy in a moment. You can't have joy from Christianity's perspective, or in Taoism, like contentedness. The feeling that I am where I'm supposed to be and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing is not possible if you try to stand still. I'm happy being lazy. I think probably everyone that's lazy, if they're honest, will admit that they're not happy. By them saying, I want to be lazy, I'm happy right where I'm at, I'm not moving, Taoism would say that then you are suffering. Suffering is coming, or is already there, and you just haven't recognized it yet.
Okay, so I know you're going to specifically connect it to stars, but
yes.
George Lucas, one time, I don't know if it was for a college commencement speech or something, but it's a George Lucas thing I read of his view of joy versus happiness.
Yeah.
Which is probably universal, but like one is just a moment, temporary, yep. But the other one is like who you are as a person.
Yeah.
And he specifically has talked about that before.
Yeah, so becoming who you truly are. Mm-hmm. So like last week or the week before, we talked about free will versus destiny. So in the Star Wars universe, they seem very interested in this idea that there is a role that everyone is intended to play, and we suffer to the degree that we don't play the role. That seems to be something that Star Wars is interested in. But the concept of yin and yang plays very nicely because in Star Wars they literally use the same language, light and dark, right? So with the Force, what we have is the perfect whole. There are two sides. the light side and the dark side. So one of the interesting things philosophically about the Star Wars universe is both sides kind of talk about bringing balance to the Force, quote unquote, but neither side actually wants it. The light side functionally wants the dark side to go away.
Exactly.
And the dark side functionally wants the light side to go away. And so from the Taoist roots of Star Wars, what almost everyone in this series is trying to do is not doable. You cannot be content or happy or joyful on the one hand and negate the need for the other side of the equation, in this case, in the other side of the Force. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, we can take that out to any episode, any moment. Yeah. Like, no one's happy in Star Wars. There's not, I mean, there are moments of happiness, but no one is content. No one is joyful. Yeah. And from a Taoist perspective, we can argue that they're not joyful because they're not embracing both sides of this force that is inside them.
Okay, so in Taoism, like, is it wrong to not, like, I'm trying to understand their view of the balance, like, because you're suffering if you're doing either one too much?
No, if you're... It's literally like if you're in a tube floating down a river, right? It's literally like that. Yeah. You suffer when you start saying, "Oh, I want to go over there, paddle, paddle, paddle." Rather than just, "I am here. This is me. I'm being the best me. I'm being the whole me, the complete me." And the river of time or cosmic power or whatever is taking me and using me in the way that, in the cosmic scheme of things, I need to be used.
Okay. All right. I think...
And we can pretty easily see the need for the light and the dark side. Because we can look at the character flaws in any of the characters, and we can pretty easily pinpoint what they're missing is the other side. So Darth Vader, for example, has given into hate, has given into anger. What ultimately balances him?
Is it like his son?
Yeah, it's love of his son, the opposite of hate. And so the reason why Darth Vader, in the end, becomes Anakin Skywalker is because he finally allowed both sides of the Force to coexist inside him. Does he still have anger? Yeah, I think for sure he does. He chucks friggin' Palpatine off the thing. He's pissed off. He says, "No!" Right?
Yeah, remember how he said that?
Yeah, I do. I hate it. And so he's an example of, I think he may be our only example, at least so far, of someone that accepted both sides of themselves and in doing so became whole.
Oh, interesting. So I don't want to... You know nothing about what's to come. I will
do not.
say this. There is a character that, for the first time, he says, "I feel the pull of the light side." So it's like the opposite of being the tempted of the dark side. Yeah. So...
See, but you even said the word tempted. In Taoism, there isn't a tempted of the light side or the dark side. Yeah. Or we can look at it psychologically. Uh-huh. The light side... emotions we generally think of as good emotions. Yeah. And the dark side emotions we generally think of as bad, right? Yeah. But there have been a lot of times in my life when I needed to be angry in order to do something or make a change or balance the scale or whatever. And so what Star Wars is doing is artificially assigning and separating what are a gamut of truly important emotions into good and bad, just like we tend to do in society. Yeah. So angry is not bad.
That's a good point.
It only becomes bad when you use your anger in a way that hurts you or hurts other people.
But can you love someone in a way that hurts you or other people?
Toxic relationships are... I don't know if that's truly love, but... like what we view as love frequently ends in breakups, divorces, etc., etc. So if I don't know if this is what Lucas was aiming at, and I don't know if he ever does truly, balance the Force or not. But part of the message of Star Wars is that you will always be suffering until you allow whichever side of this equation to have its rightful place in you.
Yeah.
That has pretty much nothing to do with good and evil. It's simply recognizing who you are, recognizing the role of quote-unquote positive and quote-unquote negative emotions in your life and using them to become who you are. So that's the overarching picture for the Force.
Okay.
And then there's a lot of other stuff, but
what will be interesting is if you follow that line of thinking into the sequels, because now this isn't George Lucas anymore.
Right.
Because George Lucas, he is the man behind these 6 movies. And there are people who say, like George Lucas's version of the Force, yada, yada, yada. So there's, like, I guess, multiple places where the Force has already been, like, reinterpreted. But then you could, then he's also like, no, everyone has access to the Force. Not even Jedis. Anyone can learn the Force. Which does happen in Ahsoka. Not the movie, but, like, in one of the TV shows, a character literally wills herself to get the Force, which I'm not a big fan of, if I'm being 100% honest. But on a philosophical level, that's a great thing.
On the philosophical level, everyone has the Force.
Exactly. Actually,
and it's just a matter of understanding it and balancing it.
I have a not even a story. It's more like an anecdote. So in 1963, there's a Canadian abstract montage collage film. I'm reading Wikipedia right now. Created by Arthur Lipset that lasts about 9 minutes 30 seconds. It is a collage of snippets from discarded footage found by Lipset in the editing room of the National Film Board, where he was employed as an animator. And it combined with his own black and white 60mm footage, which he shot on the streets of Montreal and New York City and other locations. This short is called 21-87, which is the cell number Princess Leia is stuck in.
Oh, cool.
And for the people who've seen the sequels, it's Stormtrooper FN2187. So there's another very, very specific Star Wars reference that in the next few movies.
To this film.
Yeah, to this film. Because, let me fast forward, there is on the Wikipedia, it has a couple categories: release and reception, awards, references. But the other one is influence on George Lucas. So, 2187 would have a profound influence on director George Lucas. Lucas described it as the kind of movie I wanted to make. A very off-the-wall, abstract kind of film. Because there's not like a story here. It's just like images and people talking over it. Lucas made a couple shorts that are heavily influenced with some aspects of this short film. Before American Graffiti, before Star Wars, he made a movie called THX 1138, this futuristic sci-fi thing. It was first a short film, as most movies are. To be a film director these days, you need to have a short film, usually a short film, be successful enough to get enough attention to
make it a feature.
To make it a feature film. That's what happened to George Lucas. Anyway, the point is, in the short film, there's a little tiny snippet, about 3 minutes in, which there's a voice, but it talks about a force that connects us all. And that's usually cited where George Lucas gets the name of the Force and the idea of being connected to everything. Yeah, a life force that connects to us and the planet. That came out in 1963.
Cool.
And
I might check it out if it's only 9 minutes.
Yeah, and it's just images. But the 60s, this is stepping away from your stuff, but 60s is when filmmaking really changed.
Yeah.
Because one thing, cameras became portable, and people who grew up on big studio films in the classical Hollywood era, these young up and coming directors wanted to make their own stuff, and they knew they probably wouldn't be able to get the big cameras and everything right away. So it's let's focus on these independent things. And there's French New Wave influence, yada, yada, yada. The Hays Code was coming to an end, all that stuff. So it's the 60s was just this perfect mesh pot of filmmaking was about to be changed forever. And arguably, The 70s is when we see the result of that. The directors who were young in the 60s are finally had a means to make things in the 70s, like George Lucas, that were heavily influenced by all the stuff they've seen. Time to make it their way type of thing. That's a kind of simplifying a lot of film history, but
cool.
Anyway.
That's cool.
But I wonder, like, what are we watching now that will influence future filmmakers? I mean, it's not out of the question to say YouTube.
Oh, yeah,
like,
for sure.
People starting on YouTube, finding their way into... Like, because now, like, okay, here's a connection. Now we're connected digitally. Like, TikTok, Instagram... A student brought up that he saw people dying on Instagram Reels. So I was like, who's seen someone die? And a shocking majority said that they've seen horrific car crashes or other violent things on Instagram Reels.
That's crazy.
And so what are we doing to ourselves? We are all in this big mesh together now. Like, teenagers right now, I am worried about you because... What are you watching that's going to change who you are? Yeah. You know?
We are what we watch.
Right. But if we are talking about a balance of peopleness, like Taoism, I think there are mistakes being made.
Yeah.
But the problem is kids and teenagers are just put into this world as it is. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
That's why we need to learn to think critically so we can evaluate, do I want this in my head? Do I want this as a part of who I am? Rather than just the mindless thumb scrolling thing that we do and we just take in whatever the AI says, this is what you're taking in next.
Right. There's an excellent TED Talk called like The Power of Boredom. Then one of the main cruxes of that talk is we don't allow ourselves to be bored anymore. And I am not guiltless of this. I don't want to not do anything. You know, it's like, well, might as well just... scroll something and what's
so that's the reason why creativity is dying, if it's dying to the extent that it is.
Yeah,
because boredom yields creativity.
Yeah, exactly. Like Einstein, in the talk it says this. Einstein, when he had a problem, he'd go he'd go on the porch and think about it.
Yeah,
we don't necessarily do that anymore. We just had a teacher meeting about AI.
Yeah,
AI can be a tool, maybe is heavily italicized there.
Yeah.
But is it gonna, instead of being a tool, is it gonna be a think? Like, is it gonna replace thinking? I mean?
Yep.
Anyway.
That's a good question. I'm afraid that it will.
Yeah. But like, I'm trying to make it connect to the force. Are we as a society moving away from perfect balancedness?
Yes.
And I think, I don't know.
Well, I don't think we as a society have ever been balanced.
Okay, that's a good point.
We as individuals, I think, can be and have been, but the pursuit in Star Wars of a balanced society is the pursuit that has been, since societies have existed.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, I know you didn't, I didn't even know we were going there, but...
No, that's this podcast. That's what we do.
Yeah.
There are some interesting specifics about the light side and the dark side. The light side, what they espouse as a way of life, is very Eastern. So you can pretty easily trace it to Taoism, which we've already done, but also to Buddhism and Confucianism.
Yeah. And just on a separate note, it's very easy to see George Lucas's influence on samurai films, just aesthetically.
Oh, really?
Like, if you watch Seven Samurai, these guys carrying these big swords and, protecting people. Like when Qui-Gon Jinn kneels down to meditate in the middle of the fight. Yeah. That's something that is probably like straight from like a samurai film type of thing.
Yeah.
So like it's not even, it's like the aesthetic too.
Yeah.
Jedis are samurais essentially.
Yeah. So talking about the light side, like I said, it's very Eastern in its leaning. So from Buddhism, we borrow the idea of mindfulness or being present, like living right now in the moment. Every training sequence that we see in all the 6 movies that we've watched is heavily focused on mindfulness, controlling your panic and thinking about the future or the past or, what's coming or whatever, and just being here.
Yeah. Patience. Use the force.
Yes.
Think.
Yes. Centering yourself is very Buddhist. And then especially with Anakin, so another Buddhist idea is the idea of letting go of attachments.
Okay, yeah.
And so Obi-Wan Kenobi is constantly pushing him to let go of attachments. Like you can't fall in love. Jedis don't love. That's Buddhist. Not that Buddhists don't love, but the love is a part of just what makes them whole. It's not something that you actively pursue or you worry about or you do things to accomplish. You just let go and allow it to happen.
And I know George Lucas has talked about that. 'Cause it's like, how come Jedi can't fall in love or have relationships and stuff? He's like, it's not that. It's the attachment part of it.
Yeah. So that's Buddhist. Very Buddhist. We've already talked about the yin and yang and the wu wei, but other aspects of Taoism, like you just mentioned, with that short film, is the idea of interconnectedness. So in Taoism, what I do to you, I'm not just doing to you. I'm also doing to, everyone around you and the chair you're sitting in and all of that. So there is there's no way to do something isolated, just to yourself. So in the Western, like the idea of the butterfly effect, for example, is kind of a Western version of the idea of interconnectedness.
Okay, yeah.
So in the light side of the Force, they are encouraging the awareness of that. Like in Dagobah, when Yoda's like, if you go, you're going to make this sacrifice meaningless and this and this.
Yeah.
So he's trying to teach him that any action that he takes has this ripple effect, the interconnectedness of everyone. So we can't just be selfish. In a Taoist world, you can't be. It's physically and philosophically impossible to be selfish. Because if you are selfish, you are 100% not just affecting yourself.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Yeah.
So I feel like that's a big part of the Force. Everything is connected to everything else. If you do something, it ripples out. That's Taoist.
Yeah, okay.
And then from Confucianism, so most of Confucianism is very rule-based. They were very interested in creating a perfect society, not really interested in the individual as an individual. And so in Confucianism, in order for an individual to function as a useful part of the whole, they need to cultivate themselves. There are virtues that everyone should be working on to acquire, not for themselves, but so that you can be the best yourself in the bigger machine of the social order. And so for Confucius, the ultimate goal was to create a perfectly functioning society where everyone knows their place, everyone is perfect at what they do in their place, and by them doing what they've perfected, society as a whole functions perfectly. That's Confucian philosophy. So, in the context of the Force then, the cultivation of inner perfection is very much pursued in the light side. And that's why they're always meditating and they're always trying to let go of, negative feelings and whatever, because there's a set of perfections that we can achieve, or theoretically we can achieve, that are all what we would consider light side perfections. And then the last piece of the light side is also Confucian. Generally speaking, when anyone thinks of Confucianism, they think of the extreme respect for your elders.
Yeah.
So like Mulan is the kind of go-to example of a Confucian society where there's extreme respect for the people that went before. And that's very visible in like all of the light side.
Yeah.
One of the things that makes Anakin quote unquote so bad is he doesn't have that. And so he's this loose cannon in a society that is built on you respect your master.
Yeah,
you
that's a good
respect
point.
the people that have taught you and the people that taught them and the people that taught them. So, taken as a whole, that's kind of the light side picture. Very Eastern. Go ahead.
So is it fair to say the Force is kind of like Taoism, and
Like the yin and the
Jedi
yang.
Knights are kind of like Confucianism, what they strive for. Is
Kind of.
Kind of.
I'm trying to avoid talking about the individual people.
Right. That's
And
fair.
just talk about the Force. Because when we get to individuals, all of this breaks apart. Because individuals in Star Wars have a very, very hard time recognizing that whatever side of the Force they're on, they also need the other side of the Force. And so because of that, any individual in all of Star Wars is flawed. They are not following the Wu way. They are not becoming everything that they can become, because everything that they can be and need to be is a union or a harmony of light side traits and dark side traits. So
Yeah. And like in the movies, Luke Skywalker, in A New Hope, he's wearing white. You know, in the Empire, I guess it's kind of like a gray tank top thing. But he's wearing all black in Return of the Jedi.
when he shows up to fight Vader,
I guess, there's probably official things said about that, but to me, and what you're saying, that's Luke doing both of it. He's embracing the two sides to what he needs to be.
yeah, probably.
I mean, I don't know.
I mean,
guess.
we definitely, in that final battle between him and his father, see both sides.
Yeah.
There's definite anger in Luke, and frustration, and fury, honestly, which are all, dark side traits.
Yeah.
But there's also this love and this sense of, like, everyone is whole. Like he says to his dad multiple times, there's good in you. The only way that could be true is if we take a Taoist perspective of an individual.
Yeah.
The darkest individual also, like, has this light side. They're miserable because they've pushed that side of them in as so far away that they're missing half of themselves. Like anger, fury, frustration, those are all incredibly important emotions in their place. And anytime we deny those or try and push them away, we are making ourselves less whole. So really what we're supposed to be trying to do with this inner cultivation from the light side is finding how should we be using these quote-unquote negative emotions. So the problem with most of the dark side people is they use those negative emotions to manipulate and hurt other people. That is very anti-Taoist. And that's why they ultimately fail, because they're using their dark side tendencies in a way that hurts other people, which is outside of the scope of Taoist thinking. So the dark side is a little more philosopher specific.
Okay.
So a hallmark of Eastern philosophy is there isn't usually a person. In all of Eastern philosophy, there's only two people that stand out, Confucius and the Buddha. And everything else is just this collection of wisdom that isn't really traceable to any one person. There's a lot of cultural reasons for that. But in the West, we are very interested in everyone knowing, I made this. This is my idea.
Yeah.
I'm super awesome. And so, for the dark side, that seems to hold true. So I picked three philosophers.
Wait, is one Nietzsche?
Yes. Yeah. Nietzsche is one. Machiavelli is one.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And then I picked Sun Tzu.
Wait a second.
He is Eastern.
All right. You're
but
double dipping.
I am. You're right. So Nietzsche, our famous Antichrist
Our famous
philosopher.
mustache. He's God is dead, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nietzsche, the concept that I felt like was most important and probably the foundation of the way that the dark side is presented is his concept of will to power. So he is, in the fullest sense of the word, Antichrist. So he said that Christian philosophy, the idea that we should love our neighbor and serve people that are downtrodden and give of our our goods to the poor. He says that has ruined society. All of the what we consider the gospel of Jesus Christ has ruined society. What we really need to be doing in order to make society function is what he calls will to power. Everyone needs to embrace their inner drive to acquire power, whether that's wealth, whether that's influence, physical strength, whatever it is. He says that society can only become its best if the people that are the strongest emerge and take control. And so the will to power seems to be the philosophical core of the dark side. And while I personally do not agree with pretty much anything that Nietzsche says, I feel like we can recognize in the context of Yin and Yang the importance of the will to power. Because we are only ever going to become the best of ourselves if we do it, right? If we have this will to power to be the best that we can be so that we can fill our role in the greater society or the flow of Wu Wei or whatever. So the reason why it ruins people like Palpatine is that's all there is. He just wants power for the sake of power.
No, he wants unlimited power.
Right, for the sake of having it.
Yeah.
He's not interested in becoming his best self so that he can fill his role, so he can be balanced, so he can use this power to make himself or others better. He just wants the power.
Yeah.
And so that's the unbalance of specifically of Palpatine. So Machiavelli is the grandfather of Nietzsche philosophically.
Yeah.
So Machiavelli wrote most of what he wrote to the leader, the king, the prince.
Isn't the book he wrote called The Prince?
Yeah, it's called The Prince. Mm-hmm. But it's written to the person in charge. And what he says is, you are the person in charge, and therefore, whatever you say that is good, that needs to happen, is right. Mm. And whatever means you need to employ to make what you say happen is right. Mm-hmm. That includes, murder, lying, deception, manipulation. Any of that stuff is right. As long as...
And it puts you on top?
Well, no, because you're on top.
Okay, I see.
As long as it enables your vision to happen. So his idea is that society's founder because the rulers allow subversive voices. They have a vision for what society is supposed to look like, and then you have all these people, lower people, that are like, well, actually, what if we did this, or that's a dumb idea, or that's going to hurt this person. No, Machiavelli says no. If there are those people, you kill them, or, export them to somewhere else. Whatever the ruler believes, or the vision of the ruler, you make that happen as the ruler. And so obviously we see that in Palpatine, right? He has this vision, and he spends decades making this vision happen. Once he gets into a position of power, anyone that does anything to ruin that, sidetrack it, subvert it, is dead. They're gone. And so I think in all of film, Emperor Palpatine is the best example of Machiavellian ethics. Literally anyone that does anything that's going to make his vision not happen is gone.
Yeah.
So we got Machiavelli. And then Sun Tzu, I just kind of put in here because just for one idea that he has. So Sun Tzu wrote The Art of War.
Have you read The Art of War?
Yes.
I have not.
It's brilliant. It's still used. Mm-hmm. People still write books, mostly in business, about how to use concepts in the art of war to be successful in business.
We need a teacher one. The art
Just
of
read it.
War.
Anyone can read this and see the brilliance of it.
Okay.
And how it's applicable to whatever role you're playing. But for Sun Tzu, and really the only part I wanted to bring in is the idea that you defeat your enemy by understanding them.
Oh, okay. I've heard that, yeah.
Right. And so in the case of, if we're going to stick with Emperor Palpatine, ultimately the reason he loses is because he fails to do that.
Yeah.
He's definitely got a will to power. He's definitely Machiavellian in how he approaches his use of power.
Yeah.
But he fails to understand Luke. He fails to understand his enemy. He assumes that Luke also wants power and glory and the ability to, do whatever, make the universe how he wants, whatever. He doesn't understand him at all. Luke is very, very swayed towards the light side of the Force. The love, the personal improvement so that you can help the people around you to improve as well.
Because Luke's like, your overconfidence is your weakness.
Yes.
He goes, and your faith in your friends is yours.
Yes, that is Sun Tzu. Luke is speaking Sun Tzu.
There's a funny Robot Chicken bit that goes, oh yeah, well your mom, and then they have a your mom off. Anyway.
So that's the dark side. So I think anyone that looks at that list of characteristics can see that all the light side and all of the dark side characteristics should work together. To make a complete person. So understanding your enemy doesn't have to be, I want to destroy you. It can be, your enemy can be yourself. And understanding why you're weak and why you have this weakness can help you defeat it and overcome it. Like making your enemy your friend is the easiest and most effective way to defeat an enemy. So understanding your enemy isn't evil. It's not dark. It's just used in a bad way by the practitioners of the dark side in Star Wars. Same thing with, I have this vision and I'm going to make it happen. That's not evil. The most successful people on the planet are, in that context, Machiavellian. I have this vision.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it happen. We do not have to make our vision happen by stepping on people or hurting people or, manipulating people. We can make it happen by using who we are effectively. Same thing with Nietzsche. The will to power we already kind of talked about. So as soon as we give up the will to power, we give up self-improvement. I want the power to be my best self. I want that power to use it so that I can teach the best, be the best father, be the best husband.
Yeah.
That's why I want that power. Or any of these things, light side or dark side, only become bad when we use them not in light of the other side. So if we just have the will to power and we don't have inner cultivation from the light side, our will to power is distorted. Or if we have will to power, but we don't recognize the interconnectedness of everything by using my will to power to get all this, and I'm harming all of these people, I'm really harming myself and the world around us. So these things only become bad when they're not counterbalanced by the other side.
See, I think it's only in the books there are the gray Jedi, where it's a mixture.
Those are the balanced people.
Yeah, we don't ever see them in any of movies or anything.
That's unfortunate.
I know, it's kind of,
if they're the gray, they're the balanced people, that's really unfortunate.
And I do know some people get really upset about gray Jedi just because of technically blah blah blah. So so I don't know enough to dive into the lore part of that, but there are in certain stories
gray Jedi.
Cool.
And then we have Han Solo.
Yeah. Ethics is this?
Well, no, this is still philosophy. So Han Solo is a really cool character because outside of this structure of the yin and the yang, the will to power versus the interconnectedness, all of that, we have Han Solo. Han Solo represents a philosophical school called the skeptics.
Yeah.
And so, one of the quotes that he says at some point is, I think it was in A New Hope, he says, I've never seen anything to make me believe that there's one all-powerful force controlling everything. Yep. So skeptics are constantly asking questions, prove it, show me the proof, show me the evidence. And so outside of all of what we've just set up with the yin and the yang and the both sides of the force, we also have to have the Han Solo.
Yeah.
We have to be critically thinking, to be successful in what the things that we're trying to do inside of the Force, we have to have this healthy aspect of questioning, asking questions, demanding reasoning or evidence or an explanation or proof. Because otherwise we get manipulated, like literally everyone in Star Wars gets manipulated.
Yeah.
Because they lack that skeptical, except for, I guess, Han Solo. I don't feel like Han Solo ever gets manipulated. Maybe he does. Maybe Lando manipulates him. But for the most part, he is not manipulated. What he does in these movies, he chooses to do. Because he's accepted some piece as important, something as important. Ultimately, obviously, he joins the light side because he recognizes important things, or maybe just because Leia's hot.
I mean, he ends up
whatever
with so he knows the Force exists.
Right, by the
end. Yeah.
And so he's, I think, in Star Wars to remind us that even though we have this big picture kind of formula for making complete humans, perfect humans, we also have to have this Han Solo portion of us that is not manipulatable, that is not persuadable until we decide, yes, that is a part of me. That is an important thing that I believe in. And so I think that's what Han Solo is there for.
I like that.
Whew. So that was a lot of me.
I like that. I think there's a lot of people that just want to sit down and be taught,
Well, maybe.
You know Brandon Sanderson? He's a professor, but you can watch his lectures online. It's just him just talking about stories, I think. Here's the thing. Some people are like, we don't need XYZ in education because now we have Google. Fair, but I think it's human nature to want to learn things.
Yeah,
but there's
sure.
a good chance things won't be learned if we don't have a helping hand.
I will get behind that.
Like, I don't know. I loved college.
Me too.
As an English major, a lot of it was just reading short stories, but then talking about all these things and stuff. But I never would have read those short stories if I wasn't told to read them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
We love Star Wars, and I say the royal we, as in good people who are...
Oh, yes, of course. Righteous people.
I love it when you take something we all understand or all know. It's like, well, think of it this way.
Yeah.
All art can be analyzed by doing two things. Looking at it, and then asking why.
Yeah.
So it's like, why did George Lucas do this? Why is the Force like this?
Yeah.
Why, blah, blah. And that's all analysis is.
Yeah.
There's no secret to it. Sometimes it takes research. Sometimes it takes work.
Thinking, yeah.
And sometimes it's just like, I don't know.
Why.
Maybe this is why.
Yeah.
That's what I tell my film students. It's like, I don't know. You know as well as I do sometimes.
Yeah.
You have your own interpretations, and those are literally valid.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I
I liked all of that, Dietz.
Cool.
That's what I'm trying to say is...
I appreciate that. I'm glad. Do you want to do ethics or skip?
Yeah, let's do ethics.
Okay. Ethics has three kind of main, largely independent ways of looking at right and wrong. So we have consequentialism. That focuses on, if I do this, what's going to happen. The most easily accessible, I guess, utilitarianism is a consequentialist idea. If we do this, how is that going to impact large groups of people?
Yeah.
So, if I do this, what's going to happen? Consequentialism. Deontological ethics, deontology, focuses on, do I have the responsibility to do this?
It's like Spider-Man.
Yeah, with great power. That's a deontological statement. So, do I have the duty or the responsibility, the obligation to do this? If I do, then it's right. And then virtue ethics focuses on character or virtues. So is this right in the context of who I am as a person or who I want other people to view me as? If it is, then it's right.
Okay.
If it's not, then it's wrong. And so we have in the Force all three of these. So as I was thinking about it, I feel like the practitioners of the dark side are heavily consequentialist. It's right because the outcome is what I want, is what I believe should happen or whatever. So specifically the Emperor, because nobody does, generally speaking, nobody does things that they think are wrong.
Right, yeah.
And so the Emperor does what he does because the end result, the consequence, is right. It's good. He's going to bring order to...
Yeah. Man, that argument... Okay, I saw someone like, hey, actually, the Emperor organized...
Right.
It's like, all right, let's not defend...
No, it's true, though.
the Emperor here.
So from the Emperor's perspective, what he's doing is right.
Yeah.
This is true generally for especially people that aren't in the habit of thinking critically. We can't understand, why can't you see that that's right? Mm-hmm. Like, you can open up pretty much any social media post and somebody is flaming somebody else for, why are you so stupid? Why can't you see that this is obvious? Well, that's why. Yeah. Because generally speaking, whatever it is that we think is right in our minds, whether it's right in the big picture or not, doesn't generally come into most people's decisions about right and wrong.
Yeah.
So for the Emperor, what he's doing is right because the consequence or the outcome is desirable for him and, in his mind, for everyone. Who wouldn't want to live in a completely ordered society?
Yeah.
From the Emperor's mind.
And Anakin, at the end, he's like, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil.
Yes.
And it's not even maybe that hard of an argument to see that point of view.
Yeah. Right, yes.
Let's treat you essentially as a slave.
Yep.
Let's take away all the things you could love.
Yep.
Anyway, stuff like that.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
And that's why, because he's, going to the dark side, the consequentialist ethics. Mm-hmm. So, on the other end of the spectrum, the light side, I feel like we have very, very strong virtue ethics. Virtue ethics are about me being a moral person, a virtuous person. And so just about everything that the Jedi do from their perspective is because it's righteous. Yeah. It's right. So virtue ethics leads the Jedi away from what we just talked about, away from the will to power, away from Machiavelli, away from Sun Tzu. And so by only focusing on virtue ethics, that's their weakness.
Yeah.
The dark side practitioners only focusing on the ultimate outcome is their ethical weakness.
It's like the Hamlet quote, there is no right or wrong, but thinking makes it so.
Yeah, yes. And then in the center, which is I think the kind of the battleground for ethically for the dark and the light side, we have deontology, the obligation to act or the duty to act. And so in a lot of places in these first 6 movies, mm-hmm. we see people doing things because it's their duty. They can do it, therefore they have to do it or should do it. The easiest example is Luke leaving Dagobah, right? His friends are in trouble.
Yeah.
From his perspective, he has the ability to save them. He has the skills, he has whatever it is.
Yeah.
So deontologically, he could not have made any other choice.
Yeah. So
he had to leave.
There's it's in a video game, so it's not in a movie, but there's a beautiful Luke moment where Luke there's a guy who's in the Empire, he's like trapped. He's not like a stormtrooper, you can see his face and stuff. The Luke rescues him. And he goes, why did you save me? You knew I'm Empire. And Luke goes, because you asked. Mm. And that's a beautiful Luke moment. But
that's deontology.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so here again, if we bring in the idea of yin and yang to ethics, the entire Star Wars saga up to this point is this battle of what makes something right. Mm-hmm. And if either side, or even an individual on either side, could see that all 3 of these things have to be in play in order for something to be complete or whole, mm-hmm. we have to consider what's the ultimate outcome. we have to consider, do I have an obligation, the responsibility, the ability to act to, and then is this going to reflect on my character? Is it consistent with who I am? If they would consider all three of these, this entire 6 movies would be very, very different. Everything would change because everyone would consider the long term, the short term, what's in it for me, and can I use myself, my abilities and skills to make things better or different or whatever.
And okay, hold on. I know I plug Andor all the time, but it gets into things like, well, for one thing, we need money to finance a rebellion. So it's like, even if you want to do good, sometimes you need stuff to help you out.
Sure.
And that's where it gets kind of like more realistic than the fantasy Star Wars is. Because, like, obviously, good guys win, bad guys lose.
But who are the good guys?
Right.
And who are the bad guys?
Emperor Palpatine's.
From a certain perspective, yeah.
Yeah, Obi-Wan. That's what Obi-Wan said. I remember. Anyway, I guess trying to apply it to real life, where we want the best society possible, and we have talked about this, but like, what can you do specifically? Yeah. Maybe not a lot, but you have your sphere. Like, we've taught, this is one of our go-tos. We love going back to this well, but
it's true. It's like, so true.
But like, you see the news about things happening, mostly bad stuff sometimes. It's like, well, how can we make this a better place?
Yeah.
There's sometimes you don't have the means to do it necessarily. You do what you can in your sphere.
Yep.
And like, I think what you're advocating here is like improving yourself.
Yeah. Because if we then take everything that we just talked about as a whole, we have the obligation to study ourselves, identify strengths and weaknesses, use our will to power, our strength, to modify the weaknesses or overcome the weaknesses so that they become strengths.
Yeah.
And then use our now complete arsenal of ourselves to change the world, to make the world better.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? In my case, as a high school English teacher, that means I am being the greatest teacher I can be and enabling my students to learn at a deep level, empowering them to become their best selves so that they can go out. For me, that looks like studying myself as a husband. Where am I weak? Where am I not completing my wife? And where am I not filling my duty? Figuring out where that is, changing that so that I'm a better husband. Same thing with me as a father.
Yeah.
It's looking at, and I've been actively involved in this the last couple of years as my kids have become adults. Where am I failing? Where am I coming short? What are the weaknesses in my character that isolate my children or hurt my children? Mm-hmm. Changing those things to become better. So if that's what we take out of Star Wars, ultimately it is you need to be critical of yourself first, not in a tear yourself down, but in a understand the enemy sense, in a Sun Tzu sense. The weaknesses and the parts of you that are not currently helping you become your best self are the enemy. Mm-hmm. They need to be overcome so that you, as then a complete individual, can change the world in whatever aspect that looks like for you.
Yeah.
Your skill set, your talents. I have a very limited skill set. I'm just a pretty good teacher, but I do it to the best of my ability. I'm continually looking for what doesn't work in me, in my teaching. How can I better reach this student?
Yeah, so
all of that.
It's easy to say improve yourself, but specific things, like you're talking about specific things. When I graduated, the president of the university spoke in my little ceremony. He said something. He's like, everyone, you should have a book in your hand every day. So like, you should continue to be learning things. If it's not even like, it's not just reading nonfiction necessarily. If you read fiction, that's helping your brain, that's helping your memory, that's helping like your vocabulary and stuff, and intro to ideas.
Yep.
I'm maybe not the best at it, but we should be working on our physical bodies, like exercising, don't eat garbage. I've been kind of bad at that recently. But and like even improve yourself mentally. If this is it, how would that change how you treat people around you, especially your close ones? Like, is this thing that you might get angry at, is it even worth it?
Yeah.
You know, so like emotionally in your relationships, like cultivating those.
Yep.
You know, there's a lot of ways to improve ourselves.
Yeah.
And at least for me, I'm always like, yeah, I can improve in all of these. You know, it's easy to
and so that's
see my shortcomings.
That's where critical thinking comes. Yeah, all of us have shortcomings. And so if we have the ability to think critically, we can look at all of this and figure out what is the next little thing that I need to change that will set in motion the change of this and this and this. Yeah. And we just move line upon line up through our weaknesses, turning them into strengths. We have that ability if we learn how to critically examine ourselves, say, yeah, this is the next thing. And I just work on this one thing. One of the biggest killers of what we're talking about is looking at all of the things. Being like, dang, I suck. There's no way I'm going to fix all that or change all that or develop all of that. I might as well just give up. That's where misery comes in. That is you failing the Wu Wei. That is you not being becoming the Confucian best self, so that you can fill whatever role it is that you're going to fill in society. Yeah. So don't look at the whole list and be like, man, I just might as well give up. Figure out, use your critical thinking, figure out what's the next thing, and just focus on that. Yeah. Leave the rest for the future.
I could just do a little bit at a time.
Yep.
Make it so easy that it's impossible not to do it.
Yep.
There's a video I show my students sometimes it's about reading more, but like if you wanted to be better at flossing, just floss one tooth. Boom. That's all for now. Yeah. Until you're ready for more teeth. You know, whatever.
Yeah.
Like if you're on a diet, you don't have to cut out everything right away. Right. Just maybe one thing right now.
Yep.
I feel like thinking of Star Wars as a whole, like these first 6, it's easier to see more meat from the original movies, like the lessons Yoda teaches Luke and stuff.
Sure, yeah.
I like the prequels, they are what they are, but I'm like, it seems like most of this stuff is coming from the original movies.
Yeah, it's true.
It's true.
Anyhow.
We're at an hour.
So that is your deluge of philosophy and ethics.
A lot. All good stuff.
It was a lot. So, personally, I would like, if you're still listening, to thank you for listening to all of that. Yeah. I honestly don't think I've done that for a very, very long time.
Just talked?
Just lectured, yeah.
My problem is I get stuck lecturing. I'm like...
No. Yeah, well...
Yeah.
So that's the light side. I'm the dark side. We need to find...
I'm the dark side.
We need to find the yin and the yang. Anyhow, I really enjoyed it. I love that you listened. I love philosophy. I think there's a lot that we can learn about ourselves and about the world around us from philosophy.
Next week, we're watching Matchstick Men.
Yep.
And then we're going to the sequels. Dietz, do you have any predictions for the sequels?
I mean, we just killed the ultimate dark side guy, so
we already go from that.
I'm assuming the light side rises and we, I don't know, get unbalanced the other way, maybe. I don't know. I really have no idea. Apparently I got none of that right.
I'm just so excited. So. I don't know. I mean, I already have predictions of what you will like and also what you will not like. So
yeah, you should write them down in a sealed envelope and we can open it in the episode.
That would be funny.
That would be cool.
Anyway, this is a great episode.
Hopefully.
I feel like we should do more of these.
I don't know. We'll let the people decide.
Yeah, vote with your listens.
Our core listeners.
But
anyhow,
Anyway,
We love you.
we
Thank you
love
for listening.
you. Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next week for one of my favorite movies, Matchstick Men.
All right. Bye.